State of Cannabis.
This is the State of Cannabis News Digest, a roundup of this week's key developments in the cannabis industry. Our top stories.
From coast to coast, the cannabis industry is navigating change, and in some cases, crisis. In California, Los Angeles marijuana businesses face steep new licensing fees, even as tax revenues decline. In Delaware, the state's brand new recreational market is off to a roaring start. And in Florida, leadership changes come as a high-stakes licensing battle heads to court. Elsewhere, states are charting new approaches. Minnesota is preparing to open the nation's first network of municipal cannabis shops, while Hawaii is expanding medical access through new training for healthcare providers. But in Nebraska and Texas, regulators are cracking down on unregulated hemp and THC products, sparking fierce debates over prohibition versus regulation. Meanwhile, policy fights are heating up. New York dispensaries face possible closures over a sudden zoning change. Massachusetts confronts a contamination scare and proposals that could roll back legalization. And in Oklahoma, advocates make another push for adult use legalization. Plus, a move in Pennsylvania to cover medical marijuana under workers' compensation could mark a new frontier in cannabis health policy. Stay with us for the details behind these stories. The market's rising, the businesses struggling, and the laws reshaping the future of cannabis in America.
And now here is the deeper look at the key events in the cannabis world this week.
Delaware's adult-use cannabis market made its debut on August 1st, and the opening weekend numbers are in. And they're strong. In just 3 days, dispensaries sold more than $903,000 worth of marijuana, including $625,000 in recreational sales. That's $93,750 in tax revenue at the state's 15% recreational rate. 12 medical dispensaries paid $100,000 for conversion licenses to sell recreational cannabis, with 2 locations still serving only medical patients due to local rules. Customers lined up across the state, with more than 8,000 recorded recreational transactions. Smokable flower led sales with 56% of all transactions, followed by vapes and edibles. The state says revenue will first fund cannabis regulation and related agencies, with a portion going to the Justice Reinvestment Fund to benefit communities disproportionately affected by past enforcement policies. Governor Matt Meyer says the numbers show Delaware is ready for a well-regulated, responsible market that can boost the economy while supporting public health and fairness. Marijuana Commissioner Josh Sanderlin called the launch beyond expectations, noting a smooth rollout with no significant compliance issues reported. While the sales figures are smaller than in larger neighboring states like Maryland and New Jersey, Delaware's strong start bodes well for steady growth, especially with more than 30 retail-only stores set to open next year.
Minnesota is poised to become the first state in the country with a network of municipal cannabis stores. 13 cities have applied for licenses to operate government-run marijuana shops under the state's Office of Cannabis Management. Officials say the plan builds on decades of experience running municipal liquor stores, which are known for consistent regulatory compliance and steady revenue. For example, in Elk River, a city with a population of less than 30,000 people, liquor operations bring in nearly $1 million a year. Cannabis sales in these cities will be funding property tax breaks, park projects, and other public benefits for the residents. Under state rules, municipal stores must follow most of the same regulations as private retailers, but will be allowed to sell both marijuana and hemp-derived THC products in the same location, giving them a unique advantage over private business-ran dispensaries. While cities cannot monopolize cannabis sales, they believe the combination of compliance, community trust, and dual-product sales will make the venture competitive. The first city-run shop is planned to open in December of this year. The only other example of a government-run cannabis store in the U.S. was in North Bonneville, Washington, which operated for 6 years before closing in 2021. Minnesota's experiment will test whether the municipal model can succeed in a modern, competitive cannabis market, and perhaps serve as a template for other states.
Oklahoma's cannabis advocates are once again aiming for the ballot, and this time they believe they've learned from past setbacks. Oklahomans for Responsible Cannabis Action has launched its signature drive for State Question 837, which is a proposed constitutional amendment to legalize recreational marijuana for those 21 and older. The campaign has set up between 250 and 300 retail locations, primarily at medical dispensaries, where voters can sign petitions, with plans to expand outreach at rural hubs, urban centers across the state of Oklahoma, and major public events this fall. This push comes after voters rejected a similar measure, State Question 820, in March of 2023. To make the 2026 ballot, the campaign must gather nearly 173,000 valid signatures, all while working within new restrictions signed into law by Governor Kevin Stitt earlier this year. Those rules limit the share of valid signatures that can come from any single county and add new requirements to the ballot's language. Supporters see the measure as a chance to broaden access and create economic opportunities, while opponents argue that Oklahoma's medical cannabis program already functions like full legalization. Whether voters agree this time could determine the future of adult-use cannabis in Oklahoma for years to come.
Want to stay ahead of the smoke in America's evolving cannabis landscape? Subscribe to State of Cannabis Weekly News Digest, your trusted source for fact-checked, nonpartisan cannabis reporting. Each week, we bring you the latest on federal reforms, state laws, industry shifts, and public health developments, all in one digestible episode. Whether you're a policymaker, patient, advocate, or entrepreneur, we've got the information you need to stay informed. Hit follow, give us a like or a thumbs up, drop a review or leave a comment. Share this episode with someone who cares about cannabis reform, because in this industry, knowledge isn't just power, it's survival.
In Pennsylvania, a new bill could reshape how injured workers manage chronic pain. House Bill 1766, introduced by a group of Democratic lawmakers, proposes reimbursing medical marijuana expenses through workers' compensation insurance, offering up to $250 monthly or $3,000 annually. The move aims to provide a safer, non-addictive alternative to opioids. The bill also covers the cost of renewing a medical marijuana ID and requires insurance companies to set up a system for regular reimbursement. If passed, it could take effect within 60 days and help remove financial barriers for those who rely on cannabis for relief. As debates over adult use legalization continue in the Pennsylvania legislature, HB 1766 represents an example of a focused, health-driven approach to cannabis reform.
Hawaii's medical cannabis program is entering a new phase with the launch of free accredited education courses for licensed healthcare providers. The Department of Health says the training will help doctors, nurses, and other professionals better understand cannabinoid science, dosing, potential benefits, and risks. In skills they say are increasingly important as more patients turn to cannabis for relief from conditions like chronic pain, PTSD, and severe nausea. The initiative comes on the heels of HB 302, a law signed by Governor Josh Green that allows providers to recommend cannabis for any condition they believe could help the patient and permits telehealth certifications. The law's goal is to make medical marijuana more accessible, but it also contains a controversial provision granting the Department of Health the authority to inspect patient medical records from certifying providers without a warrant. Green himself acknowledged that this could deter patients from joining the legal program, especially given cannabis's federal illegality. Hawaii's medical cannabis registry includes about 30,000 active patients, but surveys show more than 13% of residents use cannabis monthly, many through unregulated sources, and state officials hope that better-informed providers will encourage more patients to enter the regulated system, improving safety and care. The new training offered by the Department of Health is already open, and the first 200 registrar can get in for free.
In California this week, the Los Angeles cannabis industry is facing a fresh financial hurdle. This week, the City Council approved across-the-board increases to license renewal, inspection, and compliance fees for marijuana businesses. Officials say the hikes, which expect to generate about $6 million this year, are necessary to fund the Department of Cannabis Regulation, which has seen its budget demands grow even as cannabis tax revenue slipped from more than $100 million to $90 million in 2024. The department has expanded in recent years, growing from 37 to 63 employees since 2020, with salaries rising nearly 20%. Critics argue the costs are being pushed onto operators already navigating high taxes, banking challenges, and relentless competition from the illicit market. Some business owners say they're now paying for services the state already provides. Not all is grim, since a $3.1 million state grant will help hundreds of social equity license holders and applicants cover some of the new costs. But many in the industry fear the hikes could accelerate closures, shrinking the legal market and giving more ground to unregulated sales. In addition to the new fees, the new ordinance also creates a new severe violation category with fines of up to $34,000 for diverting cannabis to unlicensed sellers.
Florida's medical marijuana market is facing both a leadership shakeup and a high-stakes legal fight. Christopher Kimball, who has directed the Office of Medical Marijuana Use for nearly 3 years, stepped down in July to join Governor Ron DeSantis' office as Deputy General Counsel. His replacement, Bobby Smith, brings more than 17 years of legislative affairs experience from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. The timing is critical because in November 2024, the state awarded 22 new medical marijuana licenses, prompting over 20 unsuccessful applicants to file legal challenges. Those cases have been consolidated into a single proceeding before the Division of Administrative Hearings, with a 3-month hearing scheduled to begin in October. The complexity and number of parties involved in the legal challenges could push final license awards back by a year or more, which in turn places even more stress on a market already serving nearly 1 million registered patients through over 2,000 local physicians. The licensing announcement came shortly after voters rejected Amendment 3, a proposal to legalize recreational marijuana. The measure failed to reach the 60% approval threshold following an opposition campaign supported by Governor DeSantis. Public records later showed the Hope Florida Foundation, linked to First Lady Casey DeSantis, funneled millions to political committees that helped defeat the amendment. As the October hearing approaches, industry stakeholders are watching closely to see how the leadership change at Florida's cannabis agency might influence the state's regulatory approach and the pace of market expansion.
In Texas, a political standoff at the Capitol has put the state's hemp industry in a strange position, caught between relief and uncertainty. It all started earlier this month, when more than 50 House Democrats left the state to block a Republican redistricting bill. Their absence also froze other legislation in its tracks, including a Senate-approved measure that would ban all hemp products containing any detectable THC. Under the proposed law, possession of these products would become a Class B misdemeanor, carrying up to 180 days in jail and a $2,000 fine. That's despite strong public support for regulation over prohibition. A recent poll found that nearly 8 in 10 Texas voters want a regulated hemp market, not an outright ban. Governor Greg Abbott has signaled he's in that camp as well, vetoing a similar ban earlier this year and calling instead for potency limits, age restrictions, and tougher penalties for selling to minors. Representative Charlie Guerin has already introduced a bill to raise the purchase age for intoxicating hemp products to 21, in line with that approach. With the special legislative session ending August 20th, Time is running out for lawmakers to decide. Will Texas regulate hemp or ban it? Either way, the outcome will shape the future of cannabis policy in the Lone Star State for years to come. Stay tuned for the updates.
In Nebraska, cannabis regulation is taking center stage on two very different fronts. First, Attorney General Mike Hilgers is ramping up his campaign against unregulated hemp-derived THC products. He's now suing a California-based cannabis company, Savage Enterprises, accusing it of selling items with inaccurate labeling, dangerously high concentrations of Delta-8 and other cannabinoids, and marketing designed to appeal to kids and teens. That includes candy-like packaging and online promotions through social media influencers and even Discord servers. The AG is pushing to stop sales statewide and seek financial penalties, part of a broader effort to rein in Delta-8 and similar compounds. New legislation is already on the horizon, and both retailers and consumers can expect more scrutiny ahead. Meanwhile, Nebraska's newly formed Medical Cannabis Commission is trying to launch the state's first regulated medical marijuana program, but the rollout is hitting major roadblocks. Commissioners admit they're struggling to meet deadlines without their own funding or the authority to collect fees. Emergency rules adopted in July ban smokable and flavored cannabis sales, limit dispensaries to one per judicial district, and set strict licensing rules. Those restrictions have triggered pushback from patients, veterans, and advocates who say inhaled cannabis offers fast relief for conditions like PTSD and severe nausea. Commissioners defend the bans as necessary for child safety and point to the lack of FDA-approved smoked medicines. They also face steep costs for a seed-to-sale tracking system, which could run hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. To cope, they're exploring a novel approach, having licensees pay the vendor directly. Applications for cultivation, manufacturing, transportation, and retail licenses are technically open, though the official forms aren't finalized. The Commission hopes to start approvals with cultivators ahead of an October 1st deadline, with the next meeting set for September 2nd. Whether Nebraska can crack down on unregulated products while building a safe, functional medical cannabis program remains one of the state's biggest policy tests in the months ahead.
New York's cannabis industry is facing a sudden compliance challenge, and state lawmakers are moving quickly to respond. Last week, the Office of Cannabis Management notified nearly 200 dispensaries that their locations, which were previously approved, may violate the state's 500-foot school buffer under a new interpretation of the law. Instead of measuring from a school's front door, the buffer now applies from any point on the property line. In dense areas like New York City, that change drastically reduces the number of compliant retail sites. Many affected dispensaries are already open, having invested heavily in renovations, staffing, and community integration. Now, they face uncertainty about whether they can renew their licenses. A New York State Senator, Luis Sepulveda, has introduced a bill that would grandfather in dispensaries licensed before July 28 of 2025, allowing them to renew and continue operating at their current locations if they remain in good standing. Governor Kathy Hochul supports the move, stressing that many of these businesses are small, locally owned and operated by people from communities of color. The very entrepreneurs New York's legalization plan sought to prioritize. The bill is now in the Senate Rules Committee, and lawmakers are considering a special session to address it before January. Without legislative action, many New York's dispensaries could face expensive relocations or closures, with ripple effects across the market and a potential boost to illicit sales.
Massachusetts is at a critical turning point in its cannabis policy. The state's Cannabis Control Commission has issued a public health advisory warning that more than 7,500 cannabis products may be contaminated with yeast and mold due to a year-long testing issue at Assured Testing Laboratories, a lab which was recently suspended. This comes on the heels of two proposed 2026 ballot initiatives that would repeal the state's adult use market and ban home cultivation, in a major reversal of the voter-approved legalization law that launched a now $8 billion industry. The proposed ballot measures preserve medical use, but one version would impose new THC potency limits. Meanwhile, affected products were sold across the state without brand identification, leaving consumers and patients to check batch numbers themselves. With growing safety concerns and looming legal changes, the future of Massachusetts's cannabis industry remains uncertain.
This was the State of Cannabis News Digest, available weekly. You can listen to us on all main podcast platforms. To make sure you don't miss out on the latest updates and in-depth analysis of the cannabis industry, be sure to subscribe to our podcast. By subscribing, you'll get notifications for each new episode, helping you stay informed and ahead in the ever-evolving cannabis market. Join us next Saturday for more insights. Until then, keep thriving and stay green.